All right, thank you for being patient. We again appreciate everyone that's joining us for our presentation tonight as we talk about our April 23rd referendum. I'm Matt Burrows, Superintendent of the district.
My name is Eric Loftus. I'm the Director of Finance for the district.
Everyone that's joining us for our presentation tonight.
Good. Once again, my name is Eric Loftus, the Director of Finance for the school district.
This is Richard Forston. I am Vice President of the school. This is Richard Forston, Vice President of the school board.
And Steve Byers, President of Appoquinimink Education Association.
So we do have a question and answer section of this. So if you have any questions, feel free to put those in there and we will do our very best to get those answered for you tonight. So tonight we're going to give an explanation of what a referendum is, the referendum cycle, a comparison of our local revenue as compared to the rest of the districts in Newcastle County, our district by the numbers, who we are, what our request is on the capital side and the operational side, what's at stake with this referendum on April 23rd, the impact to you as a homeowner, the voting information, and then where you can get additional information if you did not have everything answered tonight. So in Delaware, we're a little bit unique as opposed to surrounding areas, is that we go out to our residents if we want to see an increase in our operational or debt services or need to build buildings. And those are the two taxes we go out to referendum for. In Pennsylvania, New Jersey, the school boards can just increase the taxes without going out to a vote. And then Maryland's a county system. And in that county system, the Maryland School District goes to the county, the elected county officials to have their budgets approved and increased. So on the capital side, that's for building new buildings, renovations, additions to existing buildings, and also purchase of land. And then on the operational referendum, it's our current operating expenses tied to the day-to-day operations. And we'll get into that list of everything that funds in just a little bit here. So why it's so important on the capital side, we have to get state approval for on the capital side. This past year, 10 districts, including ours, put in for a what's known as certificate of necessity to get approved for funding on the capital side. The total of those requests was $1.5 billion. We were one of 4 districts that received funding. We're actually receiving the most funding of any district because of our needs that we have. The state saw the needs that we have to have seats for our kids as we continue to grow 300 to 400 students a year. Why it's so important to get that approval from the state is they cover 77% of the cost on a 20-year bond. So it's similar to your mortgage on your house. It's a 20-year bond that is paid off just like your mortgage is in smaller chunks each month. On the operational side, you can see the list here of just day-to-day staffing and teachers, learning materials, academic programs, student services, school safety, technology, transportation, building maintenance, sports, after-school activities, and the list goes on and on of what's covered on the operational side of this.
On this particular slide, what we're attempting to show you is the cycle for referendum. Recently, Brandywine School District, Colonial School District, and Red Clay all went to referendum. And the purple line on this graph illustrates how over time expenditures naturally increase. With all of our staff, there's built into the contracts step increases annually. So there's a slight increase in salary costs each year. And then with each year, there's additional costs as prices rise with IT equipment, with curriculum supplies, cleaning supplies, office supplies, all of that stuff goes up over time. And so what's unique about our school district is that the other 3 school districts that recently passed referendums, they're actually reducing the number of students in those districts. They're losing kids over time. Our district, as was mentioned, we're growing 200, 300, 400 additional students each year. So that puts that expenditures line even at a steeper climb, because the fact that we have to then account for the cost not only of the increased stuff this year, but that there's more students that need those things. So what happens is at the beginning on the far left, there's a referendum and the revenue line is set above where the expenditure line is. For a year or two, we have a surplus that we bank. And at some point during that cycle, the expenditure line crosses over the revenue line. And then we have a period of time where we're in a deficit, which is currently where our district finds itself. And then what we do is then we go back out to the public to go to referendum to raise that revenue. And the reason is, unlike income tax, whereas somebody's tax would go up over time, then whatever that percentage is, the government or whoever would get more of that tax. They'd bring in more revenue from that tax. Here, the assessment hasn't changed since 1983, and the tax rate stays fixed. It doesn't float. There's no annual bump in that tax rate. So that's the reason why over a period of time, as that revenue stays flat, there's a need for us, as enrollments increase and costs increase, that we have to go to referendum to move that revenue line above expenditures so that we're back into a surplus period for another period of time. This chart illustrates really what we're faced with our school district right now. This is a chart that's showing a lot of information, and I'll highlight a lot of this. We're in a market there's a national teacher shortage going on. So there's a demand for teachers just about everywhere in this country. And we compete in Newcastle County mostly with the districts to the north of us. So it's the 4 other districts listed on this chart. And you can see from the tax rate, now this is the one component of the tax rate, but it's the most important component in terms of handling the day-to-day operations of the district. So out of this tax rate and the local revenue that's here listed, this is what we use to pay for the local portion of employee salaries, to pay for curriculum and IT and things like that. And as you can see, so we've adjusted the tax rates for these districts, Brandywine, Colonial, and Red Clay, to reflect the new tax rate they will get because they passed their referendums. And you can see they have a huge advantage over Appoquinimink. We're at $1.36.8. Those other districts are almost all over $2. And then that generates the local property tax revenue, where we're bringing in $37 million, and they're all bringing in significantly more revenue that allows them to pay their staff more, to retain the teachers. And if you take a look, Christina's nearly 300 students larger than our school district right now, 300 students larger, yet they're bringing in $121 million to our $37 million. That's a significant advantage that they have versus us. Part of this is driven by the fact that in Appoquinimink, there's a lot of open areas. When you're driving around this district, there's a lot of farmland, a lot of wooded areas. Christina, Brandywine, Colonial, Red Clay, there's not as much open space up there. Plus, there's a lot more commercial property that's taxed a lot heavier than the residential property. So Christiana Mall's generating an awful lot of revenue for those districts. Route 202, Kirkwood Highway, there's a lot of revenue that's being generated by the commercial property that those districts benefit that's not happening down here. And it all ends up that at the end of the day, we're generating far less revenue, local revenue per student. And when you look at that difference there, that really highlights the importance of this referendum. We've really become lean as an organization, and we've made cuts in different areas, and we're really operating on a very slim budget. But in order to sustain a lot of the wonderful things that this district is doing, the need to generate more local revenue so that we can retain our teachers and make sure that we're able to fund the things that we're currently doing is imperative right now. On this slide, we're bringing in not only the local spending, but the state spending as well. So this is the total operating budget for the school district compared to the other districts in the county. And what I would highlight here would be that when you look at it, our district is spending less than $15,000 per student, whereas the other districts are spending several $1,000s more per student. That they're able to provide a lot, once again, they're able to retain teachers better because they're able to pay more. They're able to do a lot more with curriculum and things like that because they've got more revenue to do that with. And that's putting us at a huge disadvantage right now.
So this is Richard Forston, and of all the slides I think you're going to see, this slide and the previous slide are probably the two most important. And I say that for a couple of reasons. First of all, unlike a lot of other people, but I like the idea of referendums because it forces us, the school district, to come and talk to the voters and explain what we're doing and why it is we want to raise taxes. And so if we can go back to the previous slide real quick, here we are. You can see our operating tax rate is $1.36 compared to Brandywine, Christina, Colonial, and Red Clay, which are all over $2. Colonial's at $1.98.6, so essentially $2. So our tax rate is about 30% less than the other four school districts in Newcastle County. And why am I pointing that out? Well, it's, one of the things, it's hard to say as a school district, we're doing a great job, we're being very frugal. We are, and if you watch our meetings on YouTube, you'd know that. But look at our peers in Newcastle County and compare us to our peers. And this slide shows you that our tax rate is significantly lower for operations to the point where we're only raising $37 million as compared to the other school districts. And yet our students were the third most populous, and that's why our local revenue per student, less than $3,000. Red Clay is essentially generating $7,000 per kid, more than double what we are. So, in terms of coming to you, the voters, and explaining why it is that we think an increase in the tax rate is necessary, this slide shows you what a serious financial handicap that the district is operating under. And yet, despite that, I think we're delivering pretty good results, and we're able to offer a lot of really great programs for kids, a lot of great classes, a lot of really state-of-the-art instruction. But you can only go so far without starting to run into difficulties. And obviously, we know in particular the last 4 years has seen a big increase in inflation. Our students continue to go up. Next year, we'll probably have more students than Christina. Years ago, when I first joined the school board, Brandywine actually had more kids than Appoquinimink. We now outnumber them by roughly 3,000. We are a growing district. By and large, the others are either treading water or shrinking in terms of enrollment. And so the other districts, our peer districts, have larger tax bases, significantly larger tax bases. They have a higher operational tax rate than we do, so they're generating a lot more money than we are. And yet their student populations aren't growing and expanding like ours. And so, at the last 6 months or more of school board meetings, the board has gotten presentations from our superintendent, Dr. Burrows. We've gotten presentations from our head of finances, Dr. Loftus, and we are always monitoring this stuff. We're very careful with the way we spend our money, but eventually you reach a point where there's only so much you can do, and you're going to hear in a few minutes what happens if we don't pass this referendum. Can we go to the next slide real quick? This is the other important slide. And again, it shows you, I'm going to say how thrifty, how frugal we really are. We're spending the least per student as compared to our peer districts, significantly less. If we had already the money that Brandywine, Christina, Colonial, or Red Clay had, we wouldn't be needing to go out for a referendum. Even with this referendum, if you do the math, and I have, our spending per student will only be about $15,800. It'll still be far less than the other per student, $15,800 per student. It'll still be far less than the other districts in Newcastle County. And there's a lot of things that go into that, why it is we're able to get great results spending less money per student. But again, we're at the end of our rope here. And if we can't get some additional funds, there's going to be some really drastic cuts. It's not a threat. It's just the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. So with that, I'll turn it back to Dr. Burrows.
So who are we as a district? We're over 13,000 students, almost 2,000 employees at this point, 21 school buildings. We are the fastest growing school district in the state. In the last 5 years, we've grown 17%, almost 2,000 students across the board. Middletown, Odessa, Townsend continues to grow. By 2025, we'll be almost 90,000 residents in our area. By 2035, we'll be just over 107,000 residents in our area, making us having a higher population at that point in Middletown, Odessa, Townsend than the city of Wilmington. Now, we hear, well, if you stop building schools, people would stop moving here. It doesn't work that way. We do not approve building permits. The county approves those as well as the town. We react to the growth. So in order for the state to approve our certificate of necessity, as I talked about earlier, we have to show that the students are here and that there's a need for them. And the state sees that need, and that's how we get approved for certificate of necessity. So what's our ask? On the capital side, which remember, the state covers 77% of it, and locally we cover 23% of that on a 20-year bond. We're looking to build a new middle and high school on the Summit campus and an elementary school on Green Giant Road. We did have other requests, but the state was unable to fund those just to try to keep up with growth. All three of those buildings would open in the fall of 2028. This is a picture of what the campus could possibly look like. On the bottom left there is Crystal Run Elementary School that opened this previous fall of 2023. On the right there, the building to the right is the Early Childhood Center. We have not been approved for that yet at this time, but the other two buildings and the amenities that would go along with supporting a middle and high school are pictured here. This piece of property here is a piece of property that was given to us by the town of Middletown. It's about 30 acres overall. Up there to the left is the St. Anne's community. We would look to put an elementary school here to start off with approval. Around this is going to be developments that have already been approved. And those developments will be handling the road improvements on there. So either way, if a school goes there or not, that road is going to be improved.
And real quick, before we get off of this slide, one of the questions that people ask, well, how come local governments aren't doing more to try to help the school district? There is a builder impact fee, it's called, for every new house that gets constructed. $9,000 goes to Appoquinimink for new school construction. So every time a new house is built, there's a fee of approximately $9,000. It used to be smaller. It's gone up with inflation. It'll continue to go up with inflation. But the other thing that Middletown itself has been particularly helpful on, and the district owes them a continuing thanks, is conditioning certain things on the donation of land to the school district. So this site here is approximately 30 acres in size. When the property that makes up the St. Anne's community was annexed into the town, it was 3 farms, as I recall. The town said to the developer, course, you're going to pay the impact fee every time you build a new house, but also you're going to set aside these 30 acres on the other side of Green Giant Road for the school district when the day comes that they will need land for another school. That condition and that requirement was done in 2003, just to put this in, or 2002, just to put this into perspective as to how forward-thinking and how helpful the town has been. If we had to buy that ground today on the open market, it would cost about roughly $3.6 million. So there's land that the town donated to us, very helpful. And that's not the only example of the town helping out the district. Brick Mill Elementary and Brick Mill Early Childhood Center sit on land that the district caused developers to set aside when the Dove Run community was being built. And also Bunker Hill Elementary and Appoquinimink High School sit on land, half of which was actually just donated outright at no cost. The other half was sold at a super discount bargain rate. Again, the town was instrumental in getting the developer to donate that land to the district. So I've just named the site of 5 schools that essentially didn't cost the school district anything. And so again, that's just another example or a big example of how the town of Middletown and its town council have been proactive and have been a great partner in helping us as we experience growth.
So on the operational referendum request, we're looking at 4 buckets here. The biggest part of this bucket, or the biggest bucket, is educator and staff compensation, school safety, operational costs due to growth, and maintaining student devices. We have been very fortunate as a district to be an award-winning district, receive accolades all the time, not only as a district, but our students receive those. We actually also boast the State Teacher of the Year right now. We know that those awards and things are not possible without the staff, and our staff does a phenomenal job. And without support, without the support of families, they continue to do a phenomenal job and work. And one of the things that we're facing, as Mr. Loftus stated, is a national teacher crisis. And in that national teacher crisis, we're being impacted. As we said, we grow 300 to 400 students a year. We're hiring 40 to 50 new staff members every year. Now, on top of where the other districts in Newcastle County are either shrinking or just maintaining, they're just replacing teachers that are leaving or going somewhere else. We're not only doing that, we're also hiring the new staff. So that puts us we're in a very competitive market at this point. We currently have over 60 full-time teaching openings that we haven't been able to fill since the beginning of the year. Many of those are in areas with students with differing abilities and in our secondary math and science classes. On average, we pay $5,000 less than the rest of the county. And so with that being said, we're in a competitive market. The board and all of us at district office want that support, the majority of this referendum, going towards addressing and for our most critical and our most valuable resource, our teachers and educators.
Did you mention, I mean, we've got 64 openings right now?
Yes.
Is that the number? So in addition to the growth that's going to happen next year as our student population rises, we've already got openings we still haven't been able to fill this school year, and all the issues that come with open teacher positions.
The other buckets, we have 3 other buckets. We have school safety. We want our students, our parents, and our staff feeling safe when they come to our buildings. We would put an investment in that. We'd also, as I mentioned, we're growing 300 to 400 students a year. Along with that comes additional expenses on top of just prices increases and things like that. We have increases from the additional expenses. And then we've been very thankful and appreciative of our community support through having our previous referendums and 16 and 19 to support devices, one-to-one devices from 6th to 12th grade. During COVID, it became essential to have all students to have devices. Education has changed drastically with COVID. Devices are used in the classroom, not only as for instruction, but also for remediation. And as we try to catch up and catch students up with the learning opportunities they missed during COVID. So this would allow us to make an investment and with using some other resources to have devices from K to 12. So there'll be two questions on the referendum. The first one would be the operational ask, which is for 39.9 cents. It will ask, are you for or against raising the operational tax 39.9 cents to support educator compensation, safety in schools, operational expenses associated with growth, and maintaining devices for our students? The second question is, are you for or against bonding the $66.6 million to build a new middle and high school on the Summit campus and an elementary school on Green Giant Road, which represents a 3-cent tax increase? So overall ask is 42.9 cents.
If I could mention real briefly there was some confusion back in December when we went to referendum. And so some people may be asking, how does 39.9 cents equate to the district bringing in $11 million, but then for 3 cents, we bring in the $66 million? I just want to reiterate on the capital side, where we're asking for a 3-cent increase in debt service to be able to bond the $66 million. That's over a 20-year period. So it's kind of like a mortgage, as was mentioned previously. In addition to the debt service money, it was also mentioned about the $9,000 per lot in builder impact fee money. So in order to fund the $66 million, we're using builder impact fee. We also have retired debt from projects we did 20 years ago that we will then be able to use that money to fund the new debt, plus along with the builder impact fee. And that's why that ask is only 3 cents for 3 new schools.
Thank you, Eric, for that clarification. So following the results of our December referendum, we went around and did town halls and did surveys and took feedback from our community, our stakeholders, our staff, and we came back and reduced our request 4.1 cents. There's a list up there of things that we had to remove to get to that point. It's not saying that any of that stuff is not important and needed, but we had to make hard decisions, and we took feedback and reduced the ask by 4.1 cents. What you get with successful referendum is maintain a high quality of programs and services to prepare our students for college and career after graduation, ensure the well-being and safety of our schools, create new learning environments to ensure our schools do not continue to overcrowd, provide a more competitive salary for our staff and teachers to retain and attract the highest quality of teachers. And as we all know, great schools significantly impact property values. I always say great schools equal great communities, and great communities equal great schools. Immediately after our December 12th referendum, we had to cut $400,000 from our budget. You might say, well, why was that necessary? By state law, we need to have 1 month's carryover in the summer. We knew going into preliminary budget that we weren't going to have that amount, but the state allowed us to move forward since we were having a referendum. Unfortunately, without a successful referendum in December, we needed to cut the $400,000 from our budget to get to the $4.1 million carryover that is required for us.
So what we were also asked, what's at stake if the referendum doesn't pass? And I think when we did the referendum in December, we were trying to maintain a positive campaign that basically said, we've been doing a lot of wonderful things in our schools. We want to continue to be able to do those and to sustain that. That's why we needed the referendum. However, we've been getting a lot of questions about, well, what's the impact if you don't pass? And the reality is, when we took a look at the one slide that talked about the referendum cycle, and we talked about how coming out of referendum, we would be in a surplus, but now we're in a deficit. And so we're in that deficit now. And the deficit right now is around a $3 million mark, which we knew it would be. We planned for it. And that's why we had some years where we were using proceeds to save, surpluses to save, to be able to fund through this cycle. If the referendum is not successful next year, what we're looking at would be that we'd have to make about $5 million in cuts in order to meet the state requirement for being able to hold 1 month's payroll going into the summer. That $5 million is the $3 million currently that we're spending, where the spending outgains the revenue. But there's another $1 million roughly we see each year with the employee steps, along with all the benefits and employment costs associated with those steps, about $1 million there. And then each year, due to the growth in enrollment, we have to have teachers, paraprofessionals, other positions to support those new students. The local side of salary for those positions is roughly another $1 million. And so that's how we come up with the $5 million. And once again, this would be very tough. And we'll go into, on the next slide, some of the things that would be cut.
So on the capital side of this, if we're not successful on April 23rd, we end up giving back to the state $223 million, the 77% that they would cover. And then we go to the back of the line. It's not just a matter of that we can resubmit and go back out next year for these buildings. We would go to the back of the line. We're not sure when we would be able to get the state share again. On the operational side, and this is stuff that we do not like to talk about, and as Eric mentioned, we try not to talk about it, but I think it's important that you know what's at stake and why we need a successful referendum. We're looking at increased class sizes due to staffing. We would not fill unfilled positions. We make cuts to existing positions, and we make reductions in our related arts. Reduction in classroom support, which means fewer support staff in our schools, delay replacement of classroom technology, and elimination of one-to-one devices K-5. Elimination or reduction of after-school activities, which means elimination of all after-school activities, elimination of middle school sports, and JV and freshman sports become pay-to-play. Substantial reductions to all budgets. So in order to get the $400,000 cut that we made right after December, we cut building budgets, district budgets, and made some personnel changes there to get to that $400,000. We would have to cut into those budgets significantly more, which would impact services we can deliver to students. Reductions in support for learning and decline of maintenance of buildings. And with decline in maintenance of buildings, you might not see that, in 1 year, but those compound over time. And soon enough, you're talking about things in buildings, and our buildings will be having issues from us decline or putting off maintenance of those buildings. Significant changes to our immersion programs. We'd stop our expansion of immersion. We would not expand to the high school, and we reduce our offerings across the district.
Before we move on, though, can we go back to the last slide? I want to say two things. This is Richard Forston again. So, when I talk to people who indicate that they are against the referendum, I ask them, okay, well, why? Well, I don't want my taxes to go up. No one wants their taxes to go up necessarily. But I look at them and I say, okay, but what's your plan if it doesn't pass? What would you propose us to do? On the capital side, we're seeking to build 3 new schools, which will house 3,000 students. A new high school is roughly 1,600, a new middle school is 800, a new elementary school is 600. That adds up to 3,000 students over time. Where would you have us put those kids? There's a reason why the state of Delaware and the Department of Education, which is pretty stingy about approving new buildings and capital improvements because they've got half the world asking them for money. They really only grant money to the most significant needs, and they chose to fund 3 schools. We got to pass a referendum, but they chose to fund it. And why did they do that? Because they know what I think should be obvious to everybody listening, to everybody who thinks this through. Where do you put those 3,000 kids? 3 school buildings worth of kids if the referendum doesn't pass. Well, part of it is you got to buy a lot of modular trailers, which the district has to pay for entirely on its own out of its operational budget. And we already saw that the operational budget monies that we have, that 37 million, is a pretty small number. And we already see that if this referendum were to fail, we have to make $5 million of other cuts just to handle our growth. But then this doesn't take into account where we put those kids who do come. And, part of it would be increased class sizes, but that only gets you so far. So it is a real disaster and costs us a lot more money in the long run if the capital referendum were not to pass. And on the operational side, again, what's your plan? What's your suggestion if you're going to vote against the referendum, if that's the way I ask people that question, you tell me they're going to vote against it. They don't have an answer because they haven't thought it through, because I don't know, maybe they just don't care. But this is the plan. This is what you're seeing on the screen is what we would have to do to handle the growth that's happening if the operational referendum doesn't pass. There's only so much money. We cannot spend money we do not have. We're not the federal government. We can't print money. And so tell us what you would do if this referendum doesn't pass. We've done everything we can. And if you watched our meetings last fall, and even before last fall, and you saw us as we went through the process of preparing for December's referendum, and then after that, preparing for this referendum, you saw that there was a lot more items, a lot more programs that people wanted money for, that people thought we should be asking for. And we did a very careful, I thought, winnowing approach to get to the number we're asking for. But as I said, we raise less money per student with property tax. That'll still be the case when this referendum passes. We spend far less money per student on an operational than any peer districts. That'll still be the case after this referendum passes. But if this referendum were not to pass, then, and the growth continues, then we've got issues, real issues. And that's what this slide is about. $5 million out of $37 million. I mean, that's over 10%. And it's coming out of our share because all the money we get from the state is pre-programmed. We have no choice about where the money from the state comes. The only discretionary spending we have is the money that we raise through the property tax. So there are, I mean, these aren't threats. The numbers don't lie. This is what we would have to do if this referendum were to fail.
On our website, we have a lot of information that shows what the impact would be for homeowners. On the average assessment in the district is $92,700. And at that assessment, what we're looking at here is the referendum would be a total of $398 per year in additional taxes. I would say that when you go, if you're interested, the big thing to make sure of is that you're looking at the assessment and not your market value or sales price of the home. And that information can be found on Newcastle County's website. There should be an icon at the top of their website that says parcel search. When you go there, you can pull up your property tax bill and it'll tell you the assessment. So the big thing about that is that with the assessed home value, that's a 1983 number. And for most of our homeowners in this district, there's about a ratio of 1 to 4 in that the market price would be 4 times what the assessed value is of the home. So once again, if you're going to, if you want to get an accurate number of what it's going to cost, it would be to get that assessed property value from your tax bill. And then it's simply the assessed value divided by 100, multiplied by 0.429, and that would tell you what the increase is. There's been a lot of questions, a lot of misunderstanding about the reassessment. Reassessment was a ruling from a Chancery Court decision a few years ago that stated that state of Delaware, all 3 counties needed to assess their property values to bring them up to current level. In Newcastle County, the current assessments were done in 1983. The problem with that is that there are some houses that were built 75 years ago that were assessed, that are being assessed in 1983 values. And there's homes that were closed on last week that are also being assessed back to 1983 values. So the court order is really an effort to bring everybody up to what today's value should be. But when we do that, when all the homes in this district get brought up to the current market value during reassessment, what's going to happen will be that we'll go through the exercise of adjusting the rate downward. So it would have the effect of if the entire value of the district goes up 4-fold to the current market value, then what we will be doing is taking our property tax rate and dividing it by 4 to bring that value back down so that we maintain revenue neutrality. What we can't tell you, what we don't know, is every home going to be a 4-fold increase, or are some going to be a 3-fold increase and others might be a 5-fold increase? We don't know. So what the law says is that probably a third of all homeowners will see a slight increase due to reassessment, a third will see a slight decrease, and a third will remain roughly the same. So we don't know that information. We don't know how each individual homeowner's current market value relates to the assessment. But as a district overall, we mentioned $32 million that we bring in today. After reassessment, we would also bring in $32 million on those same properties. And so that's what we mean by revenue neutrality. We're not increasing our revenue due to reassessment. If that was the case, there's no reason for us to go through the referendum process right now.
And just to be clear, assessed values are a way of determining what each person's share of the overall revenue necessary for the school district, or Newcastle County gets property taxes, Newcastle County as well. So if my house is worth, 50% more than your house, then I'm, in theory, I should pay 50% more in property taxes, and so on and so on. And ordinarily, housing prices and houses as a whole tend to rise and fall in roughly the same proportions. I mean, all housing values have gone up significantly since 1983, they've gone up significantly since 2020. And generally speaking, they've all gone up in roughly the same amount. If you talk to these companies that do the mass reassessments, which there's a company doing that right now for Newcastle County, the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is a rule of thumb that has been around, I'm going to say forever. If you read literature about assessments, if you're having trouble falling asleep, that is the rule of thumb. So they say roughly 1/3 will see a slight increase, 1/3 will see a slight decrease, 1/3 will remain the same. And the other interesting thing is as we have made these presentations to groups through the district, both I'm going to say last November, December, and also this last month, everybody thinks they're going to be part of the 1/3 that sees an increase. I mean, if we polled a room, 90% of the people would think they're going to see a slight increase in their bill. But it is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And if you talk to these mass appraisal companies, they say, yeah, that's a good estimate of what will happen.
So when's the referendum? So when's the referendum? Referendum is Tuesday, April 23rd. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. In order to vote, you must have a driver's license or state ID that shows that you're a citizen of the United States and a resident of Delaware. You're at least 18 years of age or older, and you live in the Appoquinimink School District. You do not have to be a registered voter in order to vote. You just need to meet those criteria mentioned above. If you're unable to make it on April 23rd, there is an absentee ballot. You can go to the Department of Elections website and they can guide you in that, or you can go to the district's referendum page and it will guide you on how to do that. And I will have that for you in just a few slides. Voting locations, you can see there's 13 different voting locations that are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on April 23rd. You can vote at any location. It is not like the primary or regular election, but you can only vote one time at one of those locations. So what can you do? The biggest thing you can do is share the correct information. Make sure that your relatives, your neighbors, and friends have the correct information and make an educated decision. You can be vocal and share your support on social media, in your neighborhood, with others in our district and communities and families. You can spread awareness. We do have yard signs. Feel free to pick up a yard sign. You can change your profile picture on Facebook or on social media. Be an advocate. Make sure that your family and members come out to vote from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on April 23rd. So this is our district website. You can scan that QR code there or go to Appoquinimink, type in Appoquinimink School District in your Google and it'll come to the Appoquinimink School District and you can click on there. It has loads of information, FAQs, voting requirements, absentee ballot, polling locations, the tax impact calculator is there, debunking myths, and much more information. If you have a question that you didn't get answered tonight and would like to have answered, there's a email address there, referendum@appo.k12.de.us, and we will get back to you with an answer. Please come out and support our students and staff. Vote for the capital and operational referendum on April 23rd. Gentlemen, you have anything you'd like to add to the? Yeah.
Is there any questions in the chat room?
No, there's not. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Again, if there was a question you think of after you're done, after we're done tonight, feel free to reach out. We're more than glad to get you the information. If you belong to a neighborhood association or a group and would like a presentation, please reach out on that referendum email and we'll gladly come out and speak to your group. Thank you. Have a good night.